you, Jim.
So our Helena Citizens Council members will be asking questions. They're each going to ask a question. We'll rotate around. We've got just a little bit over a half hour for the interview. So without further, and I'm sorry, we've also got Nolan Lowell Chandler.
Hi, Mr. Burton.
Good afternoon. Good afternoon, Lowell.
Good to see you again.
Greetings.
I wish I could be there in person, but I think for your sake, it's better that I'm not. The old RSV is running rampant in my household. So, well, I'll kick things off with first question that we have. Meaningful community engagement and access to city staff are important to a well-informed and well-functioning city. In Helena, we have the Helena Citizens Council, as you know, established by city charter, which is composed of 28 elected representatives from 7 neighborhood districts. The HCC makes recommendations to the City Commission on budget and future development of the city. In addition, the city has several advisory boards: parks, open lands, water quality, conservation, public art, and more, to provide community input and make recommendations to the City Commission. And let's just do, I suppose, maybe one, or do you want to take all of these questions at a time, I guess?
Yeah, we can just do them individually.
Okay. What approaches or systems of meaningful and effective community engagement have you initiated, supported, and been involved in?
Well, thank you. And I'm not sure if the HCC's had the opportunity to look at my resume. They have.
No, we've seen your bio. Yes,
Oh, the bio.
the sketch.
Well, I'll just summarize it and say that I've been in public service for over 30 years. And of which most of those years required community engagement. And, starting from in the early 90s, when I was hired as the first program manager to implement the Home Investment Partnership Program, we created the Community Housing Affordability Strategy, which required a statewide approach to community engagement to establish that plan. And then that opened up the home dollars for distribution to cities and counties throughout Montana. In addition to that, when I was first city manager, we created the first capital improvement plans for the city of Helena. It took us 4 years to develop all of those plans. And in addition to that, we've got ongoing planning with the long-range transportation plan, the budget process. We've done that differently over the years, including open houses at the Civic Center. City County urban infrastructure planning taking place now because the county has zoning and urban designations. I was a part of the first open land management plan after the acquisition of all of the open space and the creation of Home Act. We're stepping into, with the mayor and the city attorney and the city HR director, they're on a national assessment team to look at the race equity and leadership program with the National League of Cities, which is, from their perspective, a national community engagement process that we will be able to incorporate at the city government level and hopefully on a broader community-wide basis. We've got the Helena Master Plan. As you know, we've gone through, I think, a very extensive process with the City Commission in terms of allocating the ARPA funding, which has involved community leaders, community organizations throughout, the city master plan, et cetera, et cetera. So from that perspective, those are a few. of the examples that I can bring forward to address your question.
That if it's all right, I might swap the questions here and jump to the third question, the third bullet, and then save that middle bullet for last, because I think the third one's a little bit more related to what you just touched on. So how would you work with the city commission to respond to and as appropriate implement citizen council and advisory board recommendations?
Well, I think I'd start the answer to that question with the fact that we're all on the same team, we just have different roles. And the charter drives everything. It outlines our authorities and responsibilities from the mayor's perspective, the council members' perspective, the HCC, and the city manager. So within that context, and I think that there's been much improvement since I was here the last time. You've got a staff member, regular agenda access at both the administrative and the city council meetings. And so I think within that context, I would be supporting the process that the city commission puts together, hopefully with my input as to how most effectively we can tee up a complicated topic like the budget, set the stage so that your members are informed through the process, and so that collectively you can make good decisions based upon an informed position. And the budget's just one example. I think there are a multitude of others that we could use. But again, I think we're all on the same team with different roles.
Yeah, thank you. Is it permissible to do a sort of a follow-up question there?
Yes, that's okay.
Okay. So in terms of process of when a advisory board or this HCC submits a recommendation to the city, could you explain how you view that process currently and maybe how it could be improved or your view of that process, how it's best handled?
Well, currently, I think there's room for improvement, and I think we need to bring some structure forward. And it depends upon what advisory committee you're talking about and what they advise, because there are different areas of interest that exist. But using the HCC as an example, I think it's critically important that you ahead of time know what the budget process is, when we're going to meet, what the topics will be. From a big picture point of view, you understand how the revenues and expenditures are projected. And within the context of that, why decisions are being made through the process, whether you're a general fund or an assessment-based operation like the water department. So I think that the whole process, the city commission and the clerk's office is undertaking now relative to reviewing all of the advisory boards. What are the rules that we're going to operate? What's the structure that we're going to operate by? What kind of training will we have for the advisory board members? And within each particular arena, what structure makes the most sense to be as effective as you can when making recommendations to the commission? And that's really the variable, because the budget's going to be different than talking about the development of a capital improvement plan. They just, you can do that differently from a time frame perspective. Housing would be another with the the Housing Trust Fund Board and those folks. So I think they're all different, all important, but I do believe that the process the commission is undertaking to standardize that as many different disciplines as we have makes it more effective for the commission, for the manager's office, and for those who serve on the boards.
Yeah, thank you.
And then the one,
Go ahead.
oh, no, I was just gonna see if you're gonna hit the second bullet there.
Yeah, Pat, did you have anything? Were you about to talk?
Oh, no, go ahead.
Okay.
Go ahead with the next question.
Yeah. So this back to the second one. Sorry for the change up. How would you manage access to city staff? And this is just some background on this one. I think this is kind of near and dear to HCC in terms of our efforts on making recommendations on the budget. It's important, for us to be able to have discussions with city staff so that we can get a better idea of budget proposals and various line items that are being proposed within certain departments and so forth. And just having upfront early access to discuss those matters with department heads.
Yeah, so the question is, how would you manage access to city staff? And not a whole lot different than the discussions I've had with the city commission. And one of the first discussions we had is, how do we handle access to city staff with the city commission? And the process that I think over the years has worked best is that rather than have the city manager be the middle person, and you know how messages get deleted, the more you pass the message through. I think it's more effective for the HCC or the city council, the governing body, to go directly to that expert source and ask the question. And then you get the answer. First of all, I think it's better communication. It builds trusting relationships. And it's just more efficient. Where, as a city manager, I would draw the line is if, as a commissioner or an HCC representative, you're asking the staff person to allocate financial or human services, then the response that you would get from that director is, I'll have to check with the manager. Yeah, because that is done by the city commission through the budget, and then it becomes my responsibility to implement it. I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you.
Thank you. As with most attractive towns in the Intermountain West, Helena faces critical challenges in housing affordability and availability. What's your experience in fostering city-supported affordable housing development, annexations of adjacent areas of the county, and the creation and implementation of measures related to encouraging infill?
Yeah, and there's really two elements there. And when we talk about affordable housing from the city's perspective, we've got city services that only the city provides: water, sewer, police, fire, in our case, open space and trail systems. And then beyond that, there are a lot of other services and community valued developments that we can partner on. So we have a lot of strategic partners. And I think when you look at the affordable housing and the commission's view of the future in terms of creating the housing trust fund, it's a tool that the city has that not many cities do have. A lot of other resources in terms of Rocky Mountain Development Council, Habitat for Humanity, and I know that there are a lot of other organizations that we deal with. So those strategic partners need to be strong, and they're critical relative to achieving results. In terms of the development aspect, what is important to the development community is a predictable process. And for several months now, Chris Brink with all of our departments has been looking at the development review process to make sure that it's integrated across departments and that it's predictable relative to the person who wants to develop. There's still more improvements that need to be made. We need to engage the commission and get their approval, I think, on the whole process. And at least make sure that we're on the same page from a communication perspective. My experience in that arena is pretty long running. The last time I was with the city of Helena, we created in 9 years over 6,000 lots, including Mountain View Meadows, which is the only one that was created in those days that's still not built out. And, you know, I think, again, it goes back to, and we've got a number of activities that the commission has decided on recently with all of the apartment developments by Winco. We've got tonight 2 subdivisions coming in front of the planning board. And, you know, we need housing in all sectors, including, and most importantly, affordable housing. So we started working on improving the development review process probably the first couple of weeks that I showed up. I think a lot of progress has been made. There's more progress to make. And I think too, that it's been well received by the development community.
All right, well, thank you. The third question, similar to many cities throughout the country, City of Helena has budget constraints that limit the city's ability to implement long needed infrastructure upgrades and community development goals. Please describe your experience in developing creative fee assessments that will produce reliable revenue streams, and also your experience in leveraging grant dollars that would augment such revenue streams.
Well, Montana law is very prescriptive in terms of what local government can and cannot do. So the creative part makes me a little nervous when it comes to local government finance.
I'm not an attorney.
But I think what you have to tee up, first of all, you have to have a structure in place whereby the city commission, within the time frame we're working on, is well informed. From that, however they vote, good decisions will come. And the process needs to be open and transparent to the public. And as I mentioned earlier in this interview, the first time we created comprehensive capital improvement plans for the city, it took 4 years to create them all. And that was at the same time that the new GIS technology was available, and all of those systems are tied to GIS, where you can take a map and look at the water distribution system, and what the age of the pipes are, and you can help manage that facility. We went through a process through that 4 years where no assessments were raised at all, because took the position that until the city commission's informed, how can we bring forward the recommendation? So they went through a process reviewing all of the CCIPs, and you know that the dollar's limited, whether it's general fund taxes on your home or water or sewer rates, that it all comes out of the same pocket. So with limited public resources, you want the commission to be as important as they can to allocate what they consider to be the top priority. So we went through this process, and city staff recommended the replacement cycle for city streets was like 100 or 120 years, which exceeds the life of the street. And we knew that we couldn't fund it at 100%, but they considered that to be the top priority. And I think city staff recommended around a 15 or 20% increase. The city commission, where they spent the time, I think proposed a 30 or 35% increase, and there was no opposition from the public. So the groundwork had been laid with the public. The commission was well informed. They made a decision based upon what they thought was in the best interest of the city, and then we implemented that and moved down the road. Let's see.
Could you talk a little bit about grant experience and?
Yeah, thank you. As I mentioned, it's been a part of my life the whole career. I miss the old days because we used to be able at the city of Helena to fly back to DC. It's when they had earmarks. Senator Baucus was the chairman of the Senate Finance Committee, and go back to DC and say, Senator, here's what we said we would do last year. Here's how much money we received, and here's what we did. And if you didn't support them, you didn't get any money. And Senator, here's what we'd like to do this year. Here's how much money we're asking for. And that includes all of the interchanges on the interstate system, etc. And those days are gone, but that doesn't mean it's not more important. I think that based upon the results that you see from the CARES Act dollars, and at the time I was with the league, we met with the governor's office every week, how they were going to allocate those, and out of the state pool, we're able to get over $400 million to Montana cities and counties. I think again, the approach, and many decisions left to be made, but very transparent process in terms of the ARPA money, what's intended for their use. And again, it's no different, just making sure that the commission is informed so that when they make a decision, that it's based upon good information. And starting the home program, very familiar with CDBG and the old standbys. One of the difficulties we're having today is the infrastructure dollars that are out there with the bipartisan infrastructure bill. It's not as straightforward as it could be. It's all being funneled through state agencies, which makes sense because their systems are already in place. MDT doesn't have the staff to implement all the MDT projects. And one of the challenges that we've had is just the difficulty in recruiting engineers. So our engineering staff has been, I think, 3 positions shy, and you need to do the engineering to compete for the grants. So we have an interview coming up with Great West, who has the knowledge, skills, and abilities to help us. It's not building the capacity with full-time city employee like we would like to do, but it's the next best thing. So that's the way we're going to try to staff up and move forward with the infrastructure program.
Thank you.
Yeah, just in follow up to that. As I understand, the city only has one dedicated person as a grants coordinator. And I would just like to hear your thoughts on whether, the city should expand its grants department and provide more staff dedication to seeking out grants and coordinating grants with the various departments.
At this point, other than what I've mentioned in terms of hiring Great West, not only from a grant perspective but an engineering perspective, I think we're doing pretty good. 6 months ago, the city didn't have a grants coordinator, so that position is relatively new. But the other thing that I'll add, and maybe it's hard to see from a perspective outside the city county building, but we've got expertise with our planning folks up in community development, and they're very knowledgeable and effective on CDBG and the home program and the housing trust fund and coordinating through the Department of Commerce. And so we're actually on a very regular basis getting what I consider to be very valid grants to apply to our needs here in Helena. Now that can be reassessed, but at the same time, just taking inventory and coordinating with the one position has been helpful. And I think that there's room for improvement as people become more skilled in that arena. And I also look for better coordination until we can staff up in the engineering department with Great West Engineering.
Perfect. Yeah, thank you. Okay,
Last-
I
Go ahead.
suppose I'm on to the fourth question.
Go for it.
The city of Helena has multiple resolutions centered on citywide sustainability, neighborhood livability, and climate action goals, including a resolution calling for 100% clean renewable electricity for the Helena community by 2030. The resolution on climate action with the goal to reduce the greenhouse gas emissions level of the city and increase climate resilience of the public works system, and the waste reduction resolution. In your role as city manager, how will you advance and prioritize the implementation of the city's resolutions and other sustainability efforts?
Well, the commission, the mayor and the commission have just recently reauthorized the CCB. Now that would have sunset without that reauthorization, so they've already, through that action, made that a continuing priority. And based upon those decisions, and I think too, trying to work it in through their standard policy and review of the boards and commissions, and I think the CCB was the first board that they've dealt with. So that's going to be a model for the other reviews that take place on the boards. And we have a staff person now that I think is very qualified, who is going to do a good job. We're geared up to report back to the commission on where we've been and where we are. I think that it's important with the turnover that's taken place to take the time for all of us to take the time and review the resolutions, how they were adopted, what benchmarks are in them, how did those benchmarks come to play? And are they just something that was grabbed out of the air? And I don't know the answer to this. Or are they realistic, achievable, and measurable relative to the goals that we're asking our people to accomplish? And so I think there needs to be that review. Here's where we've been, here's where we are. And then moving forward, there's huge opportunity. And I think it's important as a part of the context here to know that this isn't something we're just starting as a city. That 20 years ago, the city commission adopted the Kyoto protocols. And through good management practices, good organizational changes, the city of Helena was able to implement the benchmarks in the Kyoto protocol 2 years before the deadline. Now that's part of a culture that we're talking about today with the CCC. And I think building and improving upon that culture becomes one of the top priorities, not only within the city, but within the community at large. And then with our strategic partners, with other cities, the state government, and our friends at the federal level as well. So I think that there's huge opportunities once we take the time to review where we are. How did we get here? Is everything realistic, achievable, and measurable? Then, you know, it's just like, and it's a problem-solving model I've used throughout my career. You identify the problem. The most critical part is then you have to define the problem. And if you get that right, then you're headed down the right path. If you get it wrong, you're not. Then you review your options. You select your options. You implement, monitor, and adjust. That will be an aspect important here on any number of initiatives that fit under the umbrella of climate change. You know, I think that we're in a very unique position when you consider that the city of Helena, through the ownership of the Upper 10 Mile and the improvement of that plant, the ownership of the Missouri River and the improvement of that plant, and the fact that some 15 years ago, we acquired the entire municipal reservation within Canyon Ferry Lake. That equates to about 2 or 3 inches across the whole lake, which means from a water quantity perspective, the city of Helena back in those days, and I was talking with Public Works Director not too long ago, had the ability to grow for the next 80 years. The public works director today would say, we have the room with water quantity to double size. Now, this is the most sustainable type of development you can do when you're talking about climate change. Versus Bozeman, who's at the maximum water quantity, and we've got to find water somewhere else. And I think it's important to note as well that I was around when Site E was selected as the landfill. In those days, we felt that the life of the landfill, and it's a joint city-county operation, would be 80 years. But through best management practices, diversion of waste, the projected life of that landfill today is 120 years. That's a big deal. And so it's not that climate change and good stewardship of our resources is new, but it remains important and there's more work to be done.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, I like that achievable and measurable and assessing to make sure, you know, it's something that we can achieve and measure as we make progress. I like that. Thank you.
The resolutions are very aspirational and quite astounding, really, that the community has come together, the commission, past commissions have come together with these statements of where we'd like to be. And yeah, it's really a challenge to get there, but
well, there's opportunity all around us.
indeed.
Could you elaborate on the opportunities you see? You mentioned it a couple of times. And what can you give us an example of what you see?
You mean across the board?
In relation to these questions in the city, I mean, we're a capital city. What are the opportunities for Helena to lead as a capital city?
Well, I think Helen already is. And just from the perspective of Montana League of Cities and Towns, the assessment on the race equity and leadership program through the National League of Cities. You know, when I say there's opportunity, it's at all levels. Whether it's good stewardship of our resources relative to water quantity, or the fact that we're doing a joint solid waste master plan with Lewis and Clark County that doesn't yet have conclusions. But we know that there's going to be opportunity when we look at that report. When we're doing a fire department master plan. I know that they're going to end up with the recommendations that they make based upon the profession. Well, what can we do as a community? And what level of service do we want to have? I think there's opportunity relative to good sustainable development and growth and making sure that that's predictable. And, you know, whether we're talking about opportunity with the way that a contract is being routed through the city and how that process works, or a 500 lot subdivision, or looking 50 years down the road relative to water management and sustainable development. I am a person who feels that the glass is half full, and I think there's opportunity at every junction.
The 100% renewable energy by 2030 is a highly aspirational goal
It is.
for the city to achieve. Any thoughts you'd like to share on that?
Yeah, I think that we need to spend time relative to the definition of that. Aspirational is one thing. Realistic, achievable, and measurable is another. And if we're going to get results between aspirational and realistic, how do we get there and what's the road map to do so? And I think there's opportunity there too. Whether it's new technology on solar or any number of opportunities, you know, just, you know, and not only that, but I think you have to pay attention to the state and the national economy and the international economy as to what those trends are as well. So some of it's out of our control, but not all of it.
Great. Well, thanks, everybody. We've run out of time, so I think we'll have to wrap up. Just want to thank everybody and Mr. Burton for his time and
Well, thanks for having me. I appreciate it. Appreciate your time.
Thanks for
Thank
going.
you very much.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Good to see you.
Yeah.
Thank you.